my phone here, so a good example. There we go. This is the regular meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. I'd like to call it to order. It is 7 p.m. on Monday, July 15th. This time I'd like to remind everyone to please sign in if you're a guest. Would encourage everyone to silence their cell phones. I'd also like to remind visitors, in order to facilitate an effective meeting, we ask those who wish to make public comments to the board to read the visitor guidelines found outside the door and complete the attached public participation form and get those to Dawn. The public participation is allowed during the public participation portion of the meeting. Other than that time, board meetings are not interactive with those in attendance. Thank you all for being here tonight. We have a roll call, please.
Giles.
Here.
Keith. Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz. Here. Larson.
Here.
Hennessy. McComb.
Here. And can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members, you've had a chance to see the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as it is presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion on the agenda? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The agenda for tonight is approved. First up, we have consent agenda items. Consent agenda approves minutes of previous meetings and committee meetings, bills to pay, the treasurer's report, personnel changes, and the 2019-2020 graduation date. Does anyone wish to pull anything out of the consent agenda for further discussion or individual discussion?
I actually have questions about minutes, bills, and personnel changes, if we could talk about those.
Okay. You want to talk about those now, or you want to pull those out and do those?
I don't care. However you want to do it, it's fine with
I
me.
guess we'll pull them out if we've got questions about them. Minutes, bills, and personnel changes. So left in the consent agenda, we have treasurer's report and the 2019-2020 graduation date. Is there a motion to approve that portion of the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Hennessy. Schultz.
Yes.
Keith. Giles.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, okay, let's go back to minutes. And there was a question on the minutes.
So I just had a question about whether it's in order to vote on a policy committee minutes by a whole board who wasn't at the meeting and didn't know anything, and so it seems to me that maybe that's more appropriate at the next policy committee meeting for them to vote on their own minutes, instead of us voting on minutes when Lori's the only one from the committee that's even here to vote, and so
Well, you know, this is a new thing with committee minutes, and
Good question.
the question is, and that has been discussed in the moments leading up to tonight even, on how we want to handle that. And I think what we've decided to do until we can meet with the ISB on August 5th and talk about how they recommend we handle it, is we're basically acknowledging approval of those minutes, not that we were necessarily there and participated, but we've seen them when we approved them, what's presented. It was kind of the approach we thought we'd take until we hear from the ISB. Otherwise, we're gonna have all sorts of sets of minutes and people who were there and not there, and it's gonna become a real twisted mess.
As a member of the committee that was there, Megan was not there, but Ken presented and Colleen was there. We took all of that information and presented it to vote on at the last meeting. So I felt that was very revealing, and we kind of addressed those issues in public as far as press. So I feel like we've kind of gone over that already.
Okay.
And everybody, was that the last board meeting? No, 5 of you, just 5 of us. Those 2 weren't, okay.
I guess it just makes me wonder, my first time on a board, what the role of minutes are. As a teacher, sometimes I grade for completion, sometimes I grade for accuracy, right? I don't understand if we're just supposed to say there are minutes, are we supposed to check and see if the minutes.
My
reflect the
understanding
meeting.
that they're complete and that to the best of our knowledge, they're accurate. And of course, our knowledge is limited, is dependent upon what we've been exposed to that point. So,
So I was at that meeting. I was at that meeting.
okay, so I think, we can readdress this via ISB on August 5th, but I think at this point, rather than pull out every individual section of minutes and do every section individually, we're just gonna continue our past practice of doing them as a group. And then if they tell us we need to reevaluate that,
One reason
that's my suggestion.
I would think that is good to do with now and postpone it and look at that again. I mean, we'll do it now and we'll look at, because one of those policies we probably want to put in place for this academic year, and we'll be rolling out registration this week and that kind of thing, as far as, you know, the pens and that kind of information. So we're just postponing it.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So
understand what you
we
said.
talked about it in a committee, we presented it as a whole board, which everybody had the minutes from the board meeting and that kind of thing. The press update that we talked about in the committee and at the board meeting was presented with some changes that we want to make for this coming school year. So if we wait again until the August board meeting, like school will be close to starting or have started, is that correct? It starts the 15th.
I'm not talking
She's
about
just talking
whether or
about
not
the
we do the
minutes.
press update.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm saying that there's minutes in here
Gotcha.
that we're voting on to say these are the minutes, but if you haven't even seen them, and if you weren't at the meeting, you don't know, and so that was just my question about minutes of a committee could be approved by the committee, or is it the whole, I'm just asking, because I literally don't know the
All right.
answer.
Sure, no, I get it.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take minutes off tonight's agenda? And
Just the
we'll
policy committee.
So,
Well, see, I was thinking that she just meant that, but that's not what she's saying.
no, that's
Correct,
not what I'm
right,
saying,
Tom?
I'm
That's what
just
I got.
asking about, just a question, if you wanna vote on them tonight, and we can talk about them later, I'm good with that, I
Okay.
just,
Let's do that. Let's
Understand
approve
what
them
it is.
tonight as we've customarily done, or not with the policy meeting. And then we'll talk to the ISB and we'll figure out a plan moving forward that makes sense for us.
It's a great question, Colin.
You know, because we've been talking about it for a couple days, so. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on minutes, although I think we've
it's
handled
the only question that,
it. Okay. Roll call vote on minutes, please.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy, Schultz,
yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith, McComb.
Yes. Bills. And we have a question on bills.
So my question on bills was that I noticed that the IASB dues were in the bills. And I did not hear us have a discussion about subscribing or joining or whatever for this year. And so I'm not trying to argue whether we should or shouldn't at all, I'm just asking about the procedure of us talking about that before we spend $7,500 joining. I was wondering if somehow we could have a conversation about that.
I don't think we've ever considered not being a part of ISB, so it's just kind of been something we've done.
Well, we rely heavily upon them for the recommendations, for legal ramifications, and for knowing best practice. So I'm sure that's why we did it. I never questioned it before either, because I rely on the experts in the field to give me the information that they have a much bigger perspective of than my just little small Mahomet-Seymour.
I believe at one point in decades past that was approved. It just stayed on the bills. I suppose at some point, if we wanted to discuss whether we should be part of ISD or not, we could put that on the
Well,
agenda.
we can ask the gentleman when he comes for the training too.
Yeah.
Advantages. We all get a magazine that talks about the advantages of it too. All the board members get that.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting we not,
I
I'm
get
just
it.
asking
Right,
about
yeah.
us talking about it instead of just somewhere something gets decided, is all I'm asking.
That's, you know, a past action, I think that was put in place, that we should do that, and I think it stays in effect until we decide to change it. But if we want to talk about that at some point, we can. Okay, is there a motion on the bills to approve those?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Keith, Hennessy, Hendricks,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, personnel changes.
Had two questions.
Okay.
First, I was wondering why we're approving personnel thing for something that's ended already. The driver's ed people, I think driver's ed is over, isn't it? Well,
It's ongoing, I believe.
is it, I mean, we started in June, so I was just wondering why that wasn't on the previous one. And my other question was why we're hiring the same person to be the head cheerleading coach and the assistant cheerleading coach.
Because they're splitting a stipend.
But there's another one that's another head, so there's two head coaches and an assistant coach. And the two
It has-
Chandler,
split the
Denny, and
stipend.
somebody else.
I saw that too, and it is odd the way that's done, but it's because I think there's a head coach stipend and an assistant coach stipend, and they're kind of, I believe they're kind of co-doing it, so they're splitting the stipends is how that's, it has to do with the way the stipends work. That would be probably a Matt Hensley question.
He's not here.
I-
Does Trevor know that, is he there? I saw him. Do you know that, why,
What's that?
anything,
stipend?
yeah,
No, I don't.
That probably would be best.
okay.
They're splitting it, the head coach position is being assigned 75% to one person and 25% to the other. And then the person that's receiving the 25% is listed as the assistant coach, and it almost equals out in terms of the overall stipend between the head coach and the assistant coach between the two staff members. So I think it's done pretty commonly when they split the responsibilities, it's a way of evening out that stipend.
So they're splitting the head coaching duties and one person is becoming the assistant.
So it's not, I think overall they split the duties, but it's the way that the pay is put in to even out the two stipends over two people. So that instead of one person receiving so much more money as the head coach and one receiving less as the assistant per contract, the way those percentages play out, then when they want to equally split the duties, then that divides those up
So the total stipend that we have for an assistant and football coach is being divided by
for those
two
cheer.
people.
The cheer stipend.
Yeah.
Right, the
Right.
assistant
So,
and the head coach
right.
is being divided almost equally between
Between
the two
those two.
people.
I jumped you.
Very good. All right, is there a motion to approve the personnel changes?
Does that answer her question though?
In regard to
Well, last question.
were you referencing the driver's ed?
No, I was just asking why that wasn't on the May.
Right,
Personnel.
I'm trying to
Oh, sorry.
clarify that that's.
Sorry, I
what
thought you were
you're
asking, yeah, no.
So my guess is that we did not get the hire paperwork in time to get it on the June 24th, agenda. We'll work on that on our end.
Okay, is there a motion to approve personnel changes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there other questions or discussions? Because we can do that, because we're handling it individually. Hearing none, roll call vote please.
Keith, Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy, Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, and speaking of personnel changes, we have some new hires and Christy Northrup and Dr. Nicole Rumble are going to present some of those.
I think we're gonna run and grab.
After we track down some.
Just want to say that they were very brave, bringing out two small children.
There you go.
Past their bedtime to
Trying to keep them quiet.
come on.
Sorry.
So come on over. I told
They like books, I like that.
Kelly and this is Kelly and John. Yep, come on over. And after the very beginning of the hometown and college, they have very similar bios, same family, so we thought we would kind of do that together so it's not so repetitive. So Kelly was born and raised in Peoria, and she attended ISU with a bachelor's degree in arts and sciences with a specialization in English secondary education. John grew up in Charleston and graduated from Eastern with a bachelor's degree in health education and a minor in physical education, and received a driver's ed endorsement from Milliken. They both have taught at at Peoria Heights High School for 4 years, moved to Jerseyville, Illinois, and taught there, and then taught in Florida for a year. Both John and Kelly live in Mahomet with Jack, who will be starting at MPE in kindergarten next year. And Emma,
Your school.
who will turn 2 in December. They're very excited to be joining our team. John will be our football coach and 7th grade boys basketball coach. So he's kind of already started some of his football responsibilities. He will be a PE teacher. John will be teaching PE at the junior high, and Kelly will be teaching English at high school this year. So please welcome their family
Just a fist bump. Whoa, nice to meet you.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Oh, really? I really love it. Thank you very much. I promise now you won't talk so much going on over there. Thank you.
That's nice.
There you
They like books.
Are you gonna shake
Okay, we're gonna
Thank you guys very much.
So we told them that we would go first. It's past Emmy's bedtime. So next I'd like to introduce Kevin Flores. Kevin was born and raised in the Northwest Chicagoland suburbs and graduated from Central Michigan University in 2003 with a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration, concentration in Human Resource Management. He worked in HR for 2 years, but decided he wanted to focus more on helping people and went back to school to get a master's degree in counseling and counselor education from Indiana University. Upon graduating, he began his counseling career in Omaha, Nebraska, where he worked for 4 years as a high school counselor. After having kids, Kevin and his wife Meg decided to move back to Illinois so that they could be closer to family. They have 3 children and recently moved from Savoy to Mahomet. Their daughter, Emmy, will be a 6th grader at the junior high. Their son, Mason, will be a 4th grader at Lincoln Trail, and they too have a kindergartner that will be starting at MPE. Career-wise, Kevin spent the last 8 years as a counselor at Urbana High School. In 2014, he became national board certified teacher in the area of school counseling. For the past 2 years, he's led a large department as a department chair of counseling and student support services for Urbana High School. And in this role, he helped develop innovative student-centered programs and services to meet the unique needs of the students. He is looking forward to joining our team and working at the high school as a guidance counselor this fall. So please join me in welcoming
Good day, Kevin.
I'd like to introduce Heather Johnson. Heather is going to be our new social worker who's going to do some split time between the junior high and the high school for us this year. So Heather grew up in Grays Lake in a northern suburb of Chicago. She graduated from the University of Illinois with her bachelor's degree in psychology and then her master's in social work 2 years later. Since then, she's stayed local, living in Champaign. She's worked in Urbana, Vermilion County, and recently worked for the rural Champaign County Co-op, mainly at Unity High School. Heather still lives in Champaign with her dog and 2 cats. She enjoys spending time outside, crafting, and discussing film and politics. She is close with our church and community here in Champaign County. She particularly is passionate about students with emotional disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and advocating for vocational and alternative educational opportunities. She's excited to join the Mahomet-Seymour community and make this district her home, and we are excited to have her. Welcome. So glad you're here.
Been to Grace Lake.
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah? Hello.
Thank you. It was good to meet our new folks. And we're moving on in the agenda to donations. There are no donations for July. That doesn't happen very much or very often, but I guess if it does, July is probably the month we would skip. Yeah, nobody's here. So that takes us to item number 7, communication. And first, is there anyone here from the PTO? MSEA? Anything from Foundation?
Just that they're gonna do the dueling pianos, that's a for sure given this year, so
Oh,
I gave the date last time, I don't recall, I'll have to look up the dates, but dueling piano.
Dawn, do we have anything from visitors?
No.
No, okay. So communication back from the board. I don't know if the board members have anything, but we'll start with Colleen.
So as we start having all these new principals start and new administrators, I was really excited to hear that Megan Hunter is starting early and wanting to get her staff involved in creating building goals. And I thought that was just a great change and a great new thing. And so I was really happy to hear that and see that we're starting already, even though it's July and there's some stuff happening, so.
There you go. Merle?
I can't get it in my head that summer's over when I hear things like that. So, nothing else.
Okay, Jeremy?
Well, I have a couple of things. I'm sad that the football coach left because I'm very excited. I've had parents talk to me about the Bulldog Gridiron Club they have coming, and I've had a lot of positive interactions with people about football and energy, and I just wanted that to be public because that was something that we heard as a board. I'm excited to see all they're going to talk about, but all the work that's going on this summer at the schools and with the grounds. I'm grateful for that. It gives me a lot of great pride when I drive around our community or walk around and see what's going on. It makes me proud. This is a plug because it comes out of the school district money, but I had the privilege to go down to EIU to watch the drum major camp, and our drum majors were awesome, but the drum majors were awesome, and one of the drum majors came to me after that I happened to know from Mahomet and said, well, actually there were 3 of them, and they said, you know, it was so awesome and we got to meet all these kids from other schools locally and we built relationships. And I love that because Mahomet-Seymour is a community, but we also rely on others to see what we do. So that was a nice compliment. Just 2 more quick things. I was really pleased. I already let Ryan Martin know that I was pleased that Kay Colson, he gave her credit, opportunity to plug a teacher. I think it's really important that our community knows who our teachers are. I don't have kids that are young and at the school anymore, so it's nice to keep a face out. So thank you for promoting Middletown. And then I happen to be a swim mom parent, and I was at a swim meet last weekend, and a parent came up to me who happens to work in another district and said, man, you guys took one of our really great teachers in Mahomet. And she said, I'm really sad for us, but I'm happy for you. And so that made me really proud because these people that work in our district, it's really nice to get compliments from people in the community. So that's my positives.
I'll just add that, you know, July is kind of a downtime month in a lot of ways, and some of our people get to get away a little bit and take some well-deserved breaks. But there is, beyond that, there's a lot of planning and legwork that starts. And Colleen mentioned that Megan has started at Lincoln Trail. I know a lot of our other administrators have too. I know we've been busy in the central office getting ready for next year. And so I appreciate everybody and all the hard work they're doing, even over the summer, to kind of put the building blocks in place for next year. So good job, everybody. Financial update. Trent.
Good evening, all. Plugging in.
Speaking of downtime, we missed you last month.
Yeah, thanks for covering for me, everyone. All right, so we got this fiscal year 19 financial summary. Right off the bat, and Jared's helping you. F10. Windows Key.
Switched it for duplicate.
Make it sound so easy.
Yeah. You got it.
I do. Okay. FY19 financial summary, and I had to add the little thing on the left there right before I came in. It's the fiscal year with the footnote because we all know why. But we'll see it here in a couple slides. Okay. We're not really doing this bad. So to jump right into the beginning balance, a lot of red. The beginning balance for July 1st, 18, revenue, expenses, and then the last column is the ending balances for June 30, 19. Of course, the footnote is we did receive about $4.6 million in local property tax revenue. About 55% of our total revenue comes from local property taxes, and we did receive about a fourth of that amount, which again equates to about 4.6 million. We'll get into more specifics the next slide, but this is kind of how it all played out. We started the year with close to $6.5 million in the operating funds, and ended just over $3 million in the operating funds. There's not much more you can say about that, really. It looks really ugly, but what we're going to get to here in this presentation would be where we would have been if we would have received that money. That's almost more important. We could look at this and it really doesn't mean much. I will add too, the audit started today, and of course the auditors are well aware of the goings on in Champaign County with other clients as well. So I joke about the footnote, but we did hear from Jane Quinlan, the regional superintendent, that there will have to be a lot of footnotes in the financial reports for Champaign County schools.
Well, and it's gonna skew next year's numbers too.
Exactly, yeah.
We're gonna look brilliant next year.
No doubt, so yeah, check back in next year.
So, and we are brilliant, but quite frankly, neither financial statement for either year will really be representative of actually what happened.
Exactly, yep. Assuming that, yeah, they're on time
Yeah.
next year, they will. So if we look at the specifics with the late property tax revenue, we were owed about 8.9 million in May, June. That has historically been bankable, I mean, almost to the T. So we actually received in May and June. Really, we didn't get anything in May. We received, well, we got $88,000 in May. I correct myself there. In June, we did receive, May and June rather, total, we got close to 4.3 million. So there's 4.6 we did not receive, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Good news though, we had the tax anticipation warrants on the launch pad. We did not have to issue any tax anticipation warrants. We did have enough funds set aside to, excuse me, make it through that low point in cash flow. So that was a good thing. So now if we take the ending balances for FY19 and we add in that last column from the previous slide of the revenue we should have received in FY19, that gives us a clearer picture of where we really should have landed. And that column is really something we should be pretty proud of. We were presented and approved a budget that was close to balanced back in September, and we ended as such, except for the capital projects fund, and that is really, with what we budgeted for the capital projects fund, we weren't sure where that would land depending on how the remaining phase 2 Middletown bills would be billed out, and with retainage and that kind of thing. So that was just kind of a guess. But either way, all said and done through that project, that was going to end at a certain number, and so no worries with that one.
Question there.
Yes, sir.
So the 4.6 million total not received was indeed received in July, or it's anticipated it could still show up in August?
I've not seen it yet.
So to confirm that number, I called the county last week and spoke with their expert, and first I wanted to ask her if she could provide a number that I could safely present at a board meeting to give us some accurate information, and that's what she gave me. I said, well, it's basically everything about pushed back a month, and she said, yeah, that will be received in July. It may be closer to the end, which is reasonable, but yeah, we really just shifted back a month, and unfortunately that shift splits our fiscal year, so it's just a timing thing we need to talk about. All right, so now if we look at those revised fund balances that include the tax revenue, and again, it won't in the audit, unfortunately. We are a cash basis district as opposed to accrual. Other districts that are accrual basis, that will show when the funds were vouchered, or when they were owed as opposed to received, but we have to go by when ours are received. So anyway, the revised numbers versus the projected fund balances back in the budget. If we look at all the operating funds, education, operations, maintenance, transportation, and working cash, first, second, fourth, and seventh fund there, really the fund balance decreased only about $103,000, which it sounds large, but in that size of a budget, pretty minimal, and really something that I'm personally proud of. I have to present that, but it's been a lot of work from a lot of folks in the district as well. And there again, it shows the capital projects fund decreasing to it landed at 550, That fund does not receive any property tax revenue, just the sales tax, the 1% sales tax revenue. So that is an accurate fund balance, and that is the way it will be reflected in the audit as well, with no footnotes, as opposed to what was projected. And again, that's just how the bills played out with phase 2. A year ago, we were still on the tail end of construction in June. So that was kind of a guess. But again, it was going to land where it was going to land regardless, because we had a contract for those expenses and knew what they were. Any questions with that? I know back in December, we looked at what, if we were over budget or if we're, kind of trending under budget. We ended up over budget by about 1.4% in the operating funds. It kind of came down to really a handful of expenses. Special ed, private tuition, for example, and Christine can attest to this, of course. We never really know what students are going to be coming into our district and what services they may need. So if they require services that we need to send them, or that are better served out of district, and I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but we would then pay the tuition for those students. And so the number that we budgeted for were the students that we had a year ago, and that ended up a little bit higher, about $103,000 more than budgeted in the ed fund. In operations and maintenance, we undershot high school electricity and Middletown electricity. Of course, with Middletown, that was a flat-out guess as well. Phase 1 mostly operated on electricity, and phase 2 even more so. So it's a good change, though, from old Middletown, where we were inefficiently using natural gas with an old boiler and everything. So that number ended up a little bit higher, but now we know for future reference, that was just a guess before. And really, transportation was pretty close, so kudos to Nick York for his department. Any questions with that? There's some specifics there, but we can dig deeper if there's anything. Any questions?
When did you say that we would expect to receive that 4.6 again?
This month.
This month?
Yep.
Okay. And what would that do to our days of cash on hand once we have that? I mean, I know it's going to increase it.
Yeah, so in the operating funds, we landed, and it's not here, I just know from looking at it before the meeting, but we landed about $6.4 million in the operating funds. That's about 96 days of cash on hand. So, if we would have had that, or that is with the property taxes that we would have received in June.
So we would have had about 96 days.
Yes, yeah, which again, we ended last year at 97, so that's, with those numbers added in, we are close to balance, basically balanced on our original budgets.
Anytime you call and they ask questions related to the tax bills, it's all just based upon that we're adjusting to new software and that's the delay in it,
Right. And the multiplier from the state.
but it didn't change.
Correct.
Trent,
Well, they kind of got called out on the multiplier thing. They stuck with that story for a while. Then they kind of walked away from it, went with their computer story.
It's the current story. Yes.
Trent, I really appreciate how clearly you lay out this stuff for us and how well you explain our finances. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
What would this have looked like 4 or 5 years ago for us? I mean, we went through, we were down 4.6 million, and we still ended up with, a 4 fund balance on the positive side, pretty significantly on the positive side.
5 years ago, we were still running deficits.
It was about the worst it could have been 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So we were I think we got down to the 50s, 60s days of cash on hand. The proration hit us hard.
But looking at what we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, then is
We didn't skip a beat,
pretty
really, in
significant
terms of
turnaround.
In terms of performance, yeah, absolutely. We are still waiting to hear on what tier we've been assigned to through the evidence-based funding model.
What's the ETA on that?
That's a good question.
Kind of like the county and taxes.
You know,
Moving target.
are any of our sister districts, have they found out? I mean, does everybody find out at the same time?
They would make an announcement.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel comfortable with tier 1 or tier 2, but.
Last year we knew by now, didn't we?
I feel like we did, I couldn't recall.
Seems
when
like we did.
Yeah. But they're, I guess, in their defense, they're waiting on a lot of information from school districts, and if they hear from every school district in the entire state before they can get that full formula out of the full model out. It uses a lot of data,
Trent, wasn't it a rough number of about $5 million the state did not pay us that they were contracted to do over about a 5-year period?
Say that again.
We'll be short from the state,
Yeah.
about $5 million overall.
It was just over $4 million in a 5-year period.
4 million over 5 years that.
Money that we just won't see. I mean,
Right.
I imagine if we could have that in fund balance is what we could have done, but,
Right,
It's in
and
the
it wasn't
past.
discretionary, that was a contract to be paid us.
yeah. And all the while, then they would catch up with mandated categories and they'd get behind, and it was a struggle there for a while.
Loose.
Yeah, fortunately, at the time, we had dependable local property taxes paid on time.
That was our one.
That's my last one for the
Yeah.
year. So, eventually, we'll get to both being consistent and dependable and we'll be cruising along.
Well, so far, the state has never failed us at the same time property taxes have failed us.
Right.
Gee whiz, what a deal.
Any last questions there, or? Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. Any other questions for Trent?
Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent's report, Dr. Hall.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates on the superintendent's report I provided. One is that we just need to push off online registration one more day, so it'll be opening up on Wednesday, July 17th. And that's good because we are just a short month away from school starting, which hardly seems possible. And also, just to let everyone know that we're having a special joint board meeting of the Board of Education and the Village of Mahomet Board of Trustees on Wednesday, August 21st at 7 o'clock. And that is going to be in the Edgar Room at the Mahomet Public Library. Cornbelt is not available that evening, so going to go to the library.
Okay. Very good. Any questions for Dr. Hall on her report? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to regular business, and first up under regular business is the technology service agreement, and that's Jared Lynn.
Good evening. Every single year we renew a contract with Farah Ibrahim at Microsystems International. We've been doing this since like 1991. Essentially, in a nutshell, Farah provides us with support outside of what myself and my team can provide, some expert level advice, and then just being available to our staff in the event that something I'm not available or my staff is not available. Fraud is always available. I can call him on a Saturday morning at 5 a.m. if he will answer that phone, and I have done it. So, but in my professional opinion, the scope of what Farah does for the district goes well beyond what's written in this contract. He, at that 5 a.m. phone call, he doesn't actually usually bill me for it. And he has always said, don't worry about it. I do this because it's Mahomet-Seymour. Like, those are his exact words. And so I have no problems at all bringing this to the board and asking for your approval for this, just because of the expertise that Farah provides. So it hasn't changed, the contract hasn't changed in basically forever. So
He's been around a long time too.
he's got seniority over most of our staff.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah. You remember? Yeah.
Yeah. It's been around a long time. Okay, superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the technology service agreement as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Thank you, Lori. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll
Timing with you.
we'll give it to Carly. Discussion on the technology service agreement. I know we've always been very pleased with the level of service and always felt like we get more than we
Absolutely.
bargained for.
Absolutely.
Right, so. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith, Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy, McComb.
Yes. Next item, working cash, interloan fund, and interfund loan.
Say that.
Oh, that's a tricky way to do it, Trent. Trent Nexel.
It's not as complicated as that sounds, but, yeah, so this is kind of a two-parter, but it'll be one action. So the interfund loans from the working cash to any fund, we do use those throughout the year. That was, to come back to it, primarily whenever we're waiting on property taxes In the spring, like January through April, during that valley of cash flow in a typical year, we do loan from working cash to any of those funds that may need a loan. At which time, at June 30th, we then pay all those back and we're good. It just kind of keeps those fund balances elevated a little bit so they don't go negative just in the time when we're waiting for that property tax revenue. So that's the working cash inter-fund loan portion. The second half, the inter-fund loan, which is, as it says, loaning amongst other funds. Okay, so yeah, the resolution that you have in front of you would allow up to $500,000 of inter-fund loans between education fund to O&M, transportation or life safety, O&M to ed fund, transportation or life safety, or transportation to ed fund, O&M or life safety. We have, since I've been here, we have not used that regular inter-fund loan up to the $500,000 for any reason. It's just, I believe we have this kind of in our back pocket in case we need to. In either case, with that one, it would also be paid back June 30th. So it's kind of a cash flow. It's set to kind of help with cash flow throughout the year. But we have used the working cash fund loans every year in the spring.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education. The superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the working cash inter-fund loan and inter-fund loan as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
That's Merle. Is there a second?
Second.
That's Colleen. Further discussion? I know it's a standard piece of business with you every year, just to give you some flexibility to keep all the funds afloat if something,
Right.
the glitch happens.
The hardest part is to read the agenda. Inter-fund loan.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Larson?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Giles?
Yes.
Hennessy? Keith? Schultz?
Yes.
McComb?
Yes. Cross update 100, Dr. Hall.
So we're just bringing back the policy updates that were discussed at the June 24th board meeting and also at the policy committee meeting on June 19th. These are updates to our subscription to the press policy service. They're reflective of updates and changes in the law. So just recommending that the board approves those this evening.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve or authorize, I guess, press update 100 as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Lori, is there a second?
Second.
That would be Jeremy. All right, discussion on that.
Just a point of clarity on those dues that we spend every year, that includes this as part of their normal services, is that correct?
The Press Plus subscription is an additional
Is it?
charge.
Okay.
I don't know how much that is off the top of my head. But it entails not only getting the updates, but then also the portal on our website is also not maintained by Press Plus, but comes out of that. So, we're able to do all of our policy updates within the Press Plus website. Dawn's gonna be getting some training on that. So IASB will come out here, provide that training. They're very accessible, provide a lot of support and help.
Trent said he could look up what it is.
Just last year's dues were $1,895, about $1,900 for press.
And all of that information is what comes from legislators that goes through that group that tells us what applies to the school district. I know that's my understanding on being on the committee, okay? Just so everybody knows.
Other questions or discussion?
It's like a legislative liaison for $1,800.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Hennessy? Schultz?
Yes.
Keith? Giles?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
McComb?
Yes. Next on the agenda, we have a facilities update from Steve Curtis.
And I brought support.
I didn't hear myself say Trent Metzler yet. Trent sprang to action.
It's kind of a group thing this evening, so. But good evening, we thought we'd give you just kind of a quick view of what, some of the things that we're looking at with facilities right now. Some of the things that are up and coming and some of the things that are taking place right now. Moving on to the next page, I don't know. I have to put my glasses on, you know.
Your graphics are really nice.
Thanks.
Picture in the upper right-hand corner is a little scary, but the rest of the graphics is good.
Looking at Middletown
It's even
Flurry,
scarier.
we're still working down, some of the punch list items, we're wrapping things up, I want to thank, and some of the things that were high on the list were the flooring concerns that we had for the first floor of the first grade area. Initially, we identified some areas that were problems with, which we thought could have gone really bad, but turned out to be very, very minor. Basically, a number of saw cuts that were done that left a bit of a curved edge or curled edge on the cuts where they actually didn't get them smoothed down quite the way they should have. So as of this morning, the crews were here and they started in the art room. They're going to work their way around and stay ahead of our floor crews who are trying to get things waxed and cleaned and all that. But so far the work seems to be going pretty good. They got tile removed and the concrete's smoothed out and the finish on it. So I'm anticipating, actually they're anticipating, so I'm supporting that they're going to be wrapped up hopefully by the end of the week, which won't delay us much on getting the custodial staff through the rest of the building, which they're really pushing to get done. So Warren Russo, the general contractor's on site monitoring things as well, so seems to be favorable. Some of the other things we're looking at, we've got landscaping that we're going to be working on, exterior of the building. I say that because of the playground. Outside we've got some trees that we're looking at that may have to be replaced. They're going to have to give some attention to some washout areas that they're going to be addressing, and some thin areas and grass that they'll address. Also within the playground, we've got a couple of trees that did not make it, and with Mr. Ryan's assistant and so forth, we're just decided to take the trees out and fill back in with grass. The kids need more area to play on rather than a tree to try and climb that's very So we're doing that, plus we're looking at, they'll be bringing in some dirt, doing some backfill along the foundations of the building to create a positive grade away from the building for adequate wash and so forth. We've got, that says room drain, all the room drains are okay, but it's actually a roof drain. We've got one, yeah, I thought so. We've got one roof drain that is currently draining out onto the northwest side of the building, and it's creating complications in that it's washing out the sod and soil and kind of going underneath the sidewalk. So they need to address that. But also during the winter time, as we get the thaw, it puts the rain or the moisture right out on the sidewalk and creates an ice rink for the kids. So they're taking a look at that. They're making sure the drains are piped correctly. This is actually the standby drain, so it shouldn't have much water in it anyway, but they're still taking a look at it and seeing what solutions there may need to be addressed. The other one is the kiln in the art room. We had, the first time we used it, the kiln overheated the room about midnight, and we found that the heat detection system works wonderfully. And so the engineers found with conversation with Rick that they had really undersized the air conditioning unit for that room. They owned it. They realized after they looked at all the facts, they made a big mistake. And so they, on their own ticket, are going to replace it with a more adequately sized unit. So I don't have a date on that schedule yet, but it's in process.
So at this point, is it an air conditioning issue or a kiln issue?
It's an air conditioning issue.
Okay.
The kiln is fine. It was installed properly.
I know we had kiln issues out of the gate.
That was before me, so I'm not sure what all that was. So, but it did work. It warmed up well, and so hopefully we'll get the proper air exchange and adequate cooling for the operation of the kiln. So anxious for that. HVAC and controls. HVAC, everybody's getting used to this type of a system, heat pump type of a system, if you will. So people are kind of becoming they're getting used to the idea. We've had a couple of compressor failures and a couple of other issues with different units across the building. As we found out, there's a compressor issue in the industry, so it's not just these Daikin units, it's not just us, it's every compressor that's out there right now. So that kind of makes us feel good, but we'd like to see them get some good units out there so we can be consistent again. But overall, the HVAC is coming along. We've made some headway. We're at the point now with the control system that we are integrating the alpha controls in with the Daikin units, and so we can control and monitor things accordingly. I'm working with Alpha Controls, doing some training on their systems so I can monitor not only here, but Lincoln Trail and the high school from one location. The junior high is a totally separate animal right now. So but at least the other 3 schools will be able to do that. So a few smaller things that are taking place. They had the electricians in the building. We've had carpenters in the building. We've had painters that'll be in tomorrow. So there's a lot of activity this week, getting caught up and eliminating the punch list. So that's where we're at on this one. You can see that one. Looking at some of the other projects across the district, these are things that we're kind of focusing on right now. There's an assortment of little projects that pop up that aren't listed. They're just daily things that we have to take care of. But the bigger items, of course, the Fieldhouse project, which most of us are aware of, we're focusing on that for next year, due to complications that we postponed it a year. So it's a big project coming up. I think we've already talked, and Trent's well aware, or he's got that on his calendar. I think when we're going to try and push that one. So, but the floor, redoing the floor, the curtains, the paint with the logos, the Bulldog logos, protecting panels, and the HVAC. It's going to be a very impressive project.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
And I'll add too, we have Damian Schlipp from BLDE. He's our architect, and he was the architect that was helping us out with the field house leading into that project. Spoke with Damian today, and we kind of talked about what that timeline could look like for bidding up that project for next summer. We would likely return to that November, December, and put that out to bid in January for a February bid opening date, if we're still heading that direction. Quick update on that.
We're looking at parking lot sealing all the asphalt in the district. I don't know that it's anything that we've done in the past, but it's something we want to we've been looking at to try and preserve our parking lots, get a little more use out of them before we have to go through and redo them, resurface them, and so forth.
I believe we last replaced or resurfaced or remilled, whatever it is, the high school parking lot in 2012, I want to say. So with Steve coming in, he recognizes the importance of sealing those parking lots, kind of protecting your investment, so to speak. Of course, here at Middletown and other parking areas that we've replaced the surface floors. Good idea from Steve on there.
So we looked at some costs, and these are just pretty much guesstimates that I came up with based on cost per square foot, and I calculated square footage based off of Google Earth. It's not 100%. When we get to the point of actually bidding, getting numbers, it'll be more refined numbers, but it took the average cost of a lot ceiling in the area, so that's where we came up with those numbers. But something that we can look at, doing it on a 4-year cycle, every school once a year. Let me say it again, 1 school per year over a 4-year rotation. So, good investment. So that's one of the things we're looking at, trying to get more facts and figures on. The tennis courts, I'm going to lean on you a little bit. It's kind of before me too.
Yeah. So we originally bid out as an alternate for phase 2 of Middletown tennis courts, where east of the building. Yeah. West. Like I said. So did not proceed with that project, but it's still been an interest to look into. Since then, we've talked to Damien, who I think you guys completed a project at Washington with some tennis courts. So they have they're well versed in that process and what that usually looks like. So if we want to reignite that conversation, he'll be our first call. more to come on that.
Moving down to bleacher repairs, that's a combination of things. Annual bleacher report done by BR Bleachers. The report came in this year. The $40,000 number is a variety of different things. We've got annual maintenance things that are recommended by the inspectors who looked at not only the football bleachers, but all the interior bleachers, throughout the district for every school. So it's looking at all the annual maintenance that's required by the manufacturer. Also looking at code updates for bleachers, recommendations from them that we should update, for example, railings and walk-off areas and so forth. Additional items that are actual repairs that need to be done. For example, we've got one at the high school that we need to go in and repair. So this is a combination of everything there. We can kind of pick and choose what we need to do and what we want to do there, but that's basically what the report's indicated.
Safe to assume a lot of that can be life safety.
Yes, I think. Yes.
And that was all 4 schools, you said, right?
All 4
Okay.
schools, yes, yes.
And exterior
And
of the high
exterior.
school, okay.
And the one item I don't have a number for at this point on, and it's not part of that, they did make recommendations to replace the visitors' bleachers at the football field.
Never been over there, so.
Yeah, I was over there for the first time just recently, and I can't go along with that. I know that staff have done a good job trying to replace some of the, wood bleachers with the aluminum, covers and so forth, but their recommendation is go ahead and replace. I don't know that we're there, that we can still probably get by with what's there with appropriate maintenance and repair, but something we definitely need to look at that as well.
Those are accurate.
I think we have that on the high school list on this slide too.
Right.
Yeah, so it is on
Yeah, that's right. So the other thing that is a question mark is the grounds building. Then it's across from the bus barn, backs up to a residential.
Where do you start?
Is it still standing?
It is.
Okay.
And it's probably had some additional support. As we were looking at earlier, we need to do a little pruning from the trees behind, the tree line behind it. It's an old building and it's a great pole barn, it's great to park equipment and so forth in, but it's really getting to the point of exceeding its life, and looking at good alternatives would be to our best interest. We've had some roofing issues during the spring with some of the wind and so forth. We actually had the sheet metal roofing peeling back, and we did have some repairs done there. I give Dave credit, his desk is right next to the toilet. I mean, there's a small thin wall, but we could do better, I guess, but it's somewhere in the future.
It is protecting an investment with the equipment though.
It is.
That's a good point. The raccoons like it too. They hang out.
They need shelter like all God's creatures.
We are a compassionate community. But there may be some other opportunities to use the facilities too, as we were looking at some projects at the bus barn. And if we were to shuffle some things around, we could still utilize the shelter of the buildings and so forth. Could be put to good use for. So there's things to look at, options down the road for that. So and that one. Back at the high school, we've got a couple of needs over there. One we're actively looking at and working with Damien and also with KDG for kitchen equipment. The dishwash room in the kitchen is an embarrassment. The dishwasher itself is probably the original one. It's been maintained for many years, but currently the pump discharges water onto the floor. Not a good situation. The floor is tile, and so when you add the water to the tile, it becomes loose and becomes dirty and grinding and so forth. So we really need to look at upgrading some things there. So what we're looking at is the cost of a replacement dishwasher, the ripping out or lifting out the existing floor tile and replacing it with an epoxy-based flooring, one seal.
Kinda like we have in the restrooms over there.
Exactly. And of course, there's miscellaneous exhaust work that has to be done with the new dishwasher, of course, the water and electric hookup. There's also some ceiling repair that we have to do in there as well. A couple of those items, the health department is encouraging us to correct, like the floor and some peeling and some problems with the ceiling that we're taking care of that. But that's probably the highest priority project that we have right now. And there's also possibly a health issue with the buildup of moisture on the floor underneath loose tile and.
Can you use health, life safety for that, if you're making it like safe and code, or no?
Trent?
I think if it's because, well, we have redirected facilities funds elsewhere, and if it's just because of not a neglect of the space, but I'm not sure if that would qualify us to use. Plus, I think it has to be student space for health and safety.
Yeah, we have to look.
Okay, I was just curious, I mean, if you're making it safe for the staff,
Right,
safe on workers'
sure.
comp claims and things
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think it's a priority regardless, and,
You gotta leave water out of the floor as a safety issue, I'm with Lori.
Yeah, can't hurt to ask.
so what we might do, steal your thunder, we might just jump in to get that floor done right away. There's certain parts of that current machine, or dishwashing machine, that can be elevated. I think it's just the big tables. And then we can at least get that floor done, and then the tile and slippage and all that, that's not a problem. And that can be done for $6,000, well, yeah, maybe another, around $6,000. That's money well spent, in my opinion. So, in the short term, we might go ahead and move forward with the floor and then still figure out the dish machine as a continued priority as well. There's a lot of different options for that, so we're still trying to kind of nail down on what we want to do there.
And we're running into a time factor as well, as we get closer to the start of school. So.
Yeah.
That's true.
So that one is, there's a lot of conversation with that, and Jamie's been a lot of help with that, giving us some design ideas, and there's some exhaust issues that we have to look at, and how to duct it and vent it and so forth, so.
I think currently it's not vented. I mean, it didn't have to be. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there's currently no exhaust in there, so all the steam just kind of sticks to the ceiling. A new system and anything that you put in new would need to be either the whole space vented, or in this case, we're looking at directly venting from the machine up through the roof. So all that steam and moisture gets sent outside instead of sitting around accumulating in the room and ruining the walls, causing other issues.
Which also helps out with HVAC and air machines and so forth, so.
And I believe that $7,500 number came in higher after we got some more specifics there this year.
Yes, it did.
More than double.
Yes.
But again, that's an area we need to focus some attention on for sure.
Another area at the high school, the industrial arts, specifically the wood shop area, there's a couple of items there. The dust collection system, I assume, is original to the building. It's about exceeded its functional life. I know the instructors are having difficulty with disposal of dust and accumulations and so forth. The concern there is that we don't have adequate dust collection and disposal, then you can run into health situations with potential explosion from dust and so forth, plus inhaling and so forth. So we're taking a look at that with the teacher's help. He's got some good information, and again, we've been working with Damien on that as well. He's looked at it a few times. The other thing is the paint booth exhaust. There's a small paint booth in a separate room adjoining the shop, and it's just not capturing the exhaust. It's currently now just taking the fumes from the lacquers that they're spraying and just dumping it out into the environment. So anything sitting outside the duct is going to get coated with whatever they're putting in it, which is not good, fire hazard and all sorts of things. The paint booth lighting, or should actually be maybe the paint room lighting, that's a small room, about the area of this white wall and into this wall here. The lighting is explosion proof, but there's not much lighting at all. It's dim enough to the point that they have run in additional fluorescent lighting in with drop cord that goes back out into the shop, which is not explosion proof. So we're taking a look at that as well. So we're still gathering facts and figures and dollars and trying to come up with the best solution there as well. So, and those are potential life safety and funds that we can use.
Just so everybody's clear too, with health life safety funds, a lot of these even are approvable via HLS. If the funds aren't available this year, when we're gonna do the work, we get approved for them, but unless we're able to get approved before we complete the work, it's kind of a moot point. So, something that's a rush, like, hey, we need to get this done tomorrow. And we don't want to allocate those HLS funds this year because maybe we've got them doled out for the next year or year down. It's just not worth it to go that route. Because a lot of times, just trying to keep some type of a balance for some of the larger scale items, roofs or pavement, things like that. So that's also the reason why, yes, it may be health life safety applicable, but it just doesn't make sense to request them because we don't have the funds in that balance today. The levy might be for next year. So.
Some of us date back to when health life safety money was the only money we ever had to fix anything with, so.
Right.
Well, we
We
don't want to spend
qualified
money we don't
everything we
have,
could
so.
for life safety, because there was no other money. Thankfully, we're not quite there.
Sorry.
Yeah, so HVAC control systems, we had that number from when, I believe Amoresco, along with Alpha Controls, looked into that number. So that would be, it's a larger number than we ever thought it would be, but it would gain a lot of efficiencies in terms of how that system operates at the high school. That's as specific as I can be, but that is where we got that number, would be from Amoresco. And then the turf field and new track, I got that number from Damien, which BLED has also been involved in a lot of turf and track projects over there. So that was the number that I got from Damien.
Track is our #1 participant sport at the high school and junior high. And we're to the point right now where we can't host a section on that track. Just throwing that out there.
Not for high school, for junior high. For numbers?
When you combine the numbers of high school and junior
Okay,
high, track, it's our highest student count. And we can't host a section because it's deteriorated again. So whatever we do this time needs to fix the drainage problem. Because this will be the 3rd track overhaul since I've been around. And I haven't been around that long.
It's kind of the same way with the indoor track at Fieldhouse. People don't want to come because it's so worn down. It's painful.
Right.
So.
Those spaces are used a lot. So.
Okay. Get that on the record.
Touching back on the HVAC controls and so forth, the high school is the focus of that one. The building's been added onto a couple different times, so you've got a couple of different control systems in the building, basic, going back to, so the original boilers, then adding in pneumatic control systems with an old Barber Coleman type of a system, then you add in some of the newer features with the DVC type systems. This would bring all those technologies back together and would also include the recommendations on what equipment to upgrade in addition to the controls. So this is just the controls aspect of it, but it will also give us a good idea of what mechanical parts and pieces we need to upgrade at that time, being pumps, valves, controllers, and fans, and so forth. So there's a big benefit on top of just the ability to efficiently control the system, but it gives us an opportunity to upgrade the system to entirety into a current.
Something that's not cobbled up.
Yeah, Frankenstein was coming to mind, but yeah, we bring it all together.
So would you be able to get efficiency then if you redid those control systems, which are like 20 years old or something?
Yes.
So you would have to pay some money, I think with Alpha you said, but then would you get money back? So your electric bills would be lower and sometimes they give an incentive to be more efficient or something.
You can apply for incentives through Ameren. They have those most every
So we might be able to really knock
Oh, yeah.
that down a
They
lot.
looked at that study. It's just The 750 up front is where it gets tricky.
I know when we got the 750 number, we all about choked.
Yeah.
I remember that day. But to Colleen's point, I would hope we could gain some of that back from efficiencies.
Yeah. I mean, this year, the financial summary is proof, you know, that the high school electricity, you know, was higher than budgeted.
And also just the fact that we were able to regulate the building and operate comfortably in it, as opposed to highs and lows, which are not good and don't help the comfort of our students or staff, and certainly don't help us with academic learning when we're freezing or sweating.
It allows you to more efficiently control the systems to accommodate the environment, meaning the walls and the windows are still gonna be the same. If somebody's holding the doors open endless hours through the day, it's not gonna change that, but how the system controls the HVAC will be more efficient. It'll be able to accommodate the needs better and hope to give us some savings in the back.
Did they ever give us any numbers on how much of that we could expect what kind of savings we could expect to see?
It's been a day or two.
I know,
Yeah,
it's been a long time. We should go back.
I'm sure, yeah, we probably have other reports.
And the nice thing is there's a couple different resources out there to do this. Alpha Controls is one, and there's a small handful of others that are involved with this type of work. So it's a big endeavor, but it can have a good reward.
It will. I mean, you had mentioned a few minutes ago you did Alpha with MPE. So do you want to keep the same so we don't have conflicting systems, or?
There's advantages to that. I'd be curious to see what else is out there too, what somebody else offers. The thing with any of them, you end up somewhat proprietary. Alpha will be glad to come in and survey the building and spend weeks and going through the drawings, look at all the mechanicals, evaluate our controls, and gather all this information and see how our data is going to work in their proprietary system, and then give us results at that point. And they'll be glad to come in and do that. And the other companies will come in and do the same thing. So
You were just talking about working together, and I was thinking, it wasn't on the board, but I heard something about fire systems not working together before, and so I was just thinking, we want to make sure it all works together.
right, exactly.
And so I just didn't know if, because they're proprietary, if there's a benefit to sticking with the
Right.
same, so you can
right,
work it all together.
right. So potentially. Skipping down to bleachers, and we touched base on that a few minutes ago. That's part of the recommendation from VR bleachers, and that's just a number. That's not a quorum.
So, but that number's different than the other one. Because that one's specific to the high school. Got it, okay.
Yeah.
I got it, figured out my own answer.
Yeah.
My own question.
Repair and maintenance versus replacement. Lincoln Trail, we've got a couple things going there. The biggest one is on the northeast and southeast side of the building. Both stairwells or staircases are in dire need of assistance. We're also working with Damien on that. We drug him out. It was kind of a chilly morning, and we really took a good look at it. The years of just use being on the east side of the building, salt and everything else has really taken its toll. We're actually beyond tuck pointing at this point. Most of it, it's time to take a look at replacing. And so Damien's taking a look and seeing what our best options are and most financially responsible options are. So.
And that's an item that actually is already on the 10-year survey, so there's already funds allocated. So that's not one we need to get approval for, it's just a matter of when the funds are in the account and willing to expend them on that.
Approval from ISB. Right.
Yeah, they're approved from ISB, it's just a matter of approval from the
So
district.
we still take that.
Yeah, utilizing the funds in that
Down to more specifics, the art room, number 7, classroom 73, there's countertops and faucets, water fountains and so forth in the room. They are literally falling apart. We really need to upgrade them. We've got 9 other classrooms with bad fixtures and some cabinetry work that we really need to take a look at. There's a fire hydrant there's a garden area on the west side of the building next to the playground. The fire hydrant continues to sink. So,
Okay.
And I've talked to John Kohler about that one, and also another one that's fire hydrant that's out of service at the junior high school. Talked to them about replacing and going to some recommendations. The indication is we can probably replace them for about 500 apiece. Work with the village to, they may actually come in and do the labor and hook everything up for us. So I'll be talking to them about that in greater detail. Request with the 5th grade bathroom is to bring it up to today's standards, and I don't know if it's how old it is. It may be original. I don't know. It's
It's at
definitely
least
old.
22 years old.
Almost takes me back to when I was in grade school.
It's bad old.
So that's a project that we need to take a look at. I think it was reviewed at one point before, but the request is there to do it again. Also, the gym needs to be updated and painted there as well. So there's greater detail that we can find with that, but it's definitely getting kind of dreary. And there's in one of the small boiler room that goes to the courtyard, there is an abandoned boiler there that we should go ahead and get rid of. It's been taken out of service. The other has been, there was 2 in there. One was replaced a few years ago and has taken over the capacity for both. So we just need to go ahead and get rid of it. It's not as a high priority, but we should get rid of it. So,
We reclaim some space.
yeah.
All right, as we look at funding for facility projects for the next 5 years, starting with next summer, these are the available 1% sales tax funds for each of those summers. So that's taking what we have total from sales tax, deducting what we have dedicated to sales tax backed bonds and that kind of thing for phase 2, or for phase 1 and phase 2 of Middletown, and that's what we have left. So again, as we look at all of those lists, we should consider prioritizing those and looking at what funds we have available to knock out some of those projects. Okay. I will add too, as a facilities committee, we'll plan on doing some sort of walkthrough over the next few months. We're going to talk more about that, but just we'll take Damien along and we'll go see what we have on the list, along with anything else that may come up too, and then we can start to kind of formalize a better list or a firmed up list that we can prioritize. Can I go from there? Any questions, any of that? First off, okay, not first off because we're at the end of the presentation, but lastly, I'll add, Steve has been doing an amazing job of kind of taking on, Middletown, this punch list, staying on top of it, so appreciate that. Yeah, that could otherwise kind of just get worse, but he has kept it in line, so.
Thank you to you and the staff that take care of the stuff over the summer when it seems to be easier to maybe find things out. I said that earlier, but thank you to the staff.
We've got some very dedicated people, and some that really take ownership of the jobs. Their efforts are truly.
Well, right.
Cool. I really appreciate how you put this list together for us. Because as an economist, I'm always thinking about opportunity cost, right? The cost of doing one thing is the other thing that we can't do. And so I'm hoping that we're going to get to a discussion of, which things are a priority, and putting them all in a list and then deciding seems better than this, oh my gosh, this is going to break, let's do it, than this, and we're not having a thought plan. So I really appreciate you making that list as a starting point for prioritization, like Trump was talking about.
Following the format that Trent's already set, and plus with principals and staff, on the site, they own their buildings, they know what's going on. So it's nice to be able to have a communication with everybody so we can formalize it and address the needs. So.
Well, and the 600,000 we've got the next few years, that's not as much as we would like. But that was, again, part of a plan several years ago. For a long time, it was, $300 or $350 a year we had. And we purposely just kind of stacked the way things were paid, so coming down the road, we'd have more money. So still not enough, but it's better than we were.
There was a time we had no sales tax at all, and variable confidence on state money all the time. And when a boiler went, it's like, where's the cash? It was a little rough. And to have built this building and still have $600,000 a year, even though it's not $1.5 million, it's still impressive.
and haven't raised taxes.
We can be smart.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a transportation update with Nick. Come on.
Number is 600,000.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for setting the bar that high.
See, you went to a real tech guy for your background.
Oh, just guys,
Sorry.
Okay, I will very briefly go over kind of what we do over the summer and then get to a more pressing need with our underground storage tanks issue that came up just after school ended.
Yeah.
So every summer we go through the bus, top to bottom, front to back, left to right. We have a contract with Rush Truck Centers, and our mechanic now and I have developed a checklist. Go through the bus and make sure it is everything's up to par that we need it for before school starts. If it's even close to any number of services, we go ahead and take care of it. We are repainting the tire rims, patching the seats, scraping gum, everything that you can do to a bus to get it clean inside and out, and just getting it ready to face the students come August. But if we get it up to a certain point, then it'll be easier to maintain throughout the year, which is my goal, so that we don't have to do as much every summer. So with that, bus routes will change based on students going to into school, grading up. So we're working on that, working on calculating the new arrival times at the different stops. We're definitely in the midst of it. We look at, I've met with all the drivers to look at, where are we picking up students now? Are there sidewalks there? Is there a contractor that is always parking his truck and trailer there? Is there an abandoned car? I mean, just whatever the case may be, looking at what our obstacles are at every stop. Is it at a person's house that is a retiree that has no students in the district, or is it at someone's house that actually has a student in the district? So trying to make it accommodating for not just the students, but the community as well. And we're looking at the age of the students at the stops and the neighborhood. Can they walk 4 more houses down and we eliminate 1 stop, get times that much faster, try to get students on the bus less and to school faster or home faster. We're looking at very small changes that hopefully will lead up to bigger ones. With Middletown being where it is, that was a huge change. It's off on its own island, so that changes the whole dynamic, but if we could make some other smaller changes, loading faster, meeting with the principals about some very small changes. Here at Middletown, I'm looking at something as simple as these magnets that go on the side of the bus that have animal symbols, so kids can get pre-sorted by animal, and they look out on the bus, they see that animal. We're not asking a first grader to go to bus 26 or whatever, they go to the flamingo, whatever the case may be. So something as simple as that, and even making it a little bit more comfortable for them. There's a railroad in Seymour that is an abandoned railroad, but it still has the railroad signs up. So I'm working with I think they call it the Community Engagement Committee. I forget what Seymour calls it, but getting those signs removed so that we actually, because right now we legally have to stop at those stops. Abandoned railroad, no train will ever go on it, still have to stop going north and south of Seymour. Trying to get rid of that. So just those little changes that hopefully will add up to a little bit bigger change in times. If you're looking for where your student goes, everybody logs into Skyward for their kids, hopefully, to get that information. There's a little tab on the left that says busing, look at it. They'll have your drop off and pickup location and the approximate time. It's a very approximate time right now. It all depends on how many students end up riding. Some get added later on, some decide, I don't want to ride the bus. Parents decide they don't want their kids to ride the bus. So it definitely changes and evolves throughout the school year. And at the end of the day, it's the drop-off time is day-to-day. It can be a crapshoot. You never know which student's gonna forget their backpack, or was there a party at the school, or any number of different things where one student can delay one bus, and that has really cascading effect. So we try to stick to it in the afternoon as much as possible, but all it takes is one small delay, and then
every stop after that is gonna be that much later. So afternoon is definitely kind of the biggest crapshoot, but we will, this year I hope to update Skyward much more regularly with the actual times, with better data from our school bus routing software. So with that, if there are any problems, that's my direct number. If it's on the district website, so I can put it out there. If there's a request for that particular day, if you want your student to go home with another student, that's fine. If they are going to a babysitter for the rest of the school year, if you think that you're there on time and the bus is missing you, or you feel like you're waiting a long time, that's when you call. Let us know what's going on and we'll see what we can do. Let us know that they're putting in a new water main at that bus stop, and so maybe we need to move it a couple, half a block, whatever the case may be. If they're having, if your child is having a problem with another student, if you have an issue with the driver, if you have any sort of related issue to the bus, just let us know. We're very happy to hear that and deal with it as soon as quick as possible. Again, what I said when I was hired, I hope to be the least of your troubles. So with that, before school starts, definitely get some communication out. Remind people, say, go to Skyward. That'll be your time, your pickup location, and then let them, parents know. Bus is an extension of the classroom. We have certain expectations for them, behavior, language, and let them know that what I told you, that the bus routes and times and locations are an evolving process. So we have a 5-minute window. You need to be there 5 minutes before your stated stop time. If that changes, if we have major changes in the number of bus riders, we will communicate that, and we will try to always update Skyward with that, direct them to that, try to let that be the major point of contact. And I hope that does prompt an influx of calls or emails, and that we get all those kinks worked out before school even starts. With that, we have expectations for our students, we have expectations for our drivers. So they complete a 2-hour safety course every year with the Champaign-Ford County Regional Office of Education. Throughout the year, they update their bus permit with physical, drug test, and we also have a back-to-school meeting. We have the behavioral coaches from the district come. They will talk about how to communicate properly with students of all ages, how to deal with rather precarious situations with students. Try to make that bus ride as easy as possible, kind of just get the students home with no issues. Try to make it the easiest transition from school to home or home to school as possible. And one thing that I'm trying to do is really instill a sense with the drivers that we have a service to provide to both students and their parents, and keep that in mind, keep that big picture in mind when we are transporting them. We don't need to have this large scope. We just need to have a very narrow scope of what we need to do, and I think we need to provide that in the most excellent way possible. So with that, major issue. So we have 2 underground storage tanks. We have 2,000 gallons for diesel for the buses, some lawnmowers, and the grounds tractor. We have gasoline for driver's ed cars, service vehicles, activities bus, and some other mowers. And with those underground tanks, we have various inspections. And with those inspections come certain costs. The annual and 3-year range from $6,000 to about $1,000. The 5-year, which involves partially excavating and draining the tanks and physically lowering a person into the tanks after cutting a hole in it, are about $12,000. So, with that, the fruition is that the gas tank was fine, but the diesel tank has a seam that is broken and it was allowing water intrusion. Now, given the location of the given the location of the seam that's broken and the water table, it seems more like water was intruding into the tank rather than diesel was leaking out. Diesel's heavier than water, or water's heavier than diesel. So it seems more like it was just going in. We don't expect a lot of EPA issues with that, but it was still ordered removed. And so we have to take that next step. And the next step is either to abandon it in place, which means we keep the underground gas tank and we fill the diesel tank in with sand cement mix called flowable fill and abandon it in place, leave it there. We would still have to have an alternative tank then for diesel. We can remove it, but the problem is we have two tanks, and if you remove one, the soil structure doesn't really allow to leave just one. It would probably have to have both of them removed. So, and with that, the associated cost to abandon it in place is about $6,500. Of that, $3,300 is soil testing. To have them removed is, only one estimate is about $9,800, and $3,300 of that is soil testing. However, there is a fund, the Liquid Underground Storage Tank Fund, unfortunately known as the LUST Fund, that we can tap into, that is part of a tax for that could actually cut the removal cost in about half, and we could maybe get it down to about $5,000. So I'm working with a couple of different companies that are very familiar with that to work with that. That wouldn't get it fully up to par. That would just get them removed. We'd still have to pay over them, but that cost would be significantly reduced tapping into that fund. With that, if we abandon in place, then in 5 years, the underground gas tank would still have to be inspected, and that would be roughly 2/3 of the cost of both inspecting. So it's still probably going to be around $8,000. So what we're looking at is an above ground tank. There's a 2,500 gallon tank that is split 500 gallons gas, 2,000 gallons diesel, and can service buses and service vehicles and mowers and everything. And it will have obviously some significant setup costs, but the tank itself would be about $6,800. Electrical is looking to be about $3,300. Concrete for the pad, we're waiting on 2 estimates. I can't say what it'll be. I'm guessing it will be anywhere from maybe $5,000 to $7,000, depending on how crazy we get with the kind of safety barriers on it, which given the location in the Lincoln Trail parking lot and buses and parents and teachers all driving around it, we might have to err kind of on the side of safety to make sure no one runs into it. But the some of the advantages of it are it's a double wall tank and it doesn't require anything else. With a underground tank, you have to have 2 people trained with underground tank maintenance. And there are the annual inspection costs. With an above ground tank, there's no annual inspection costs. It's a double wall tank. There is no 5-year annual. There's no inspection. The fire marshal will come and inspect it on their own dime. We don't have to pay for any of that. It's a tank that can be moved. If the bus barn is ever moved, you can pick it up and move it to wherever it's going to be. I think it would service us a lot better. $12,000 every 5 years is pretty significant. We can spend a little bit more than that one time and be done. The problem with it is that the locations that it has to be at is at least 30 feet away from any structure or easement, which means that we are encroaching on Lincoln Trail parking, which is at a premium. So we've looked at a couple different locations, one of which would take up bus parking and is unfortunately on a slope, which means we would actually never be able to actually fully fill up a bus, which we have some long trips that can become an issue. If we put it on level ground and stay 30 feet away from the building, it would be, and this is something that I would love to work with the board on to actually physically see where we're looking at these locations. We can put it on level ground, buses can fill up fully, and it would require us though to take away 1 spot in the Lincoln Trail parking lot and 2 off-street parking spots and pave an additional exit from the Lincoln Trail parking lot.
Okay.
However,
I love it when there's just always great options.
Well, you know, so this does have some additional advantages. The bus could theoretically back up or snake through the parking lot if we absolutely had to. However, adding this additional exit, which honestly shouldn't be too bad. There's only about 20-some feet of grass that we would have to pave. If it would be an exit only for buses or any other cars in the Lincoln Trail parking lot, and anyone that's been in the Lincoln Trail parking lot at the end of the day understands that you are trapped in there. I mean, there's no getting out from about 3:05 to 3:30. It's just you're stuck. If you are parked on that end of the parking lot at the end of the day, you could get out of this exit, not pass by a bus that's loading students. It would be completely safe.
So we could sell parking exit passes to help pay the additional expense.
Just a toll booth attendant.
There you go, okay.
Fast pass.
I like it.
Did you say fast pass?
Yeah.
And the workshop to build the attendance box.
Exactly.
Like a stand.
Exactly. So it would resolve some issues that we weren't intending to resolve. But I'm still waiting on estimates of that. I think the exit paving would be pretty minimal compared to the rest of the concrete work. Still waiting on talking to the township, Steve, to make sure we do it in a legal fashion.
Nick, how many parking spots again did you say it costs us?
1 in the parking lot, 2 off the street.
Okay.
So, and it would, with the tanks, underground tanks being removed, we can kind of shift our parking around with the buses as well, and kind of utilize that a little bit better. Depending on that scenario, we might be able to gain some parking for our own vehicles or for our staff. So we might be able to get some back. It all depends on the spacing of all that.
You couldn't align that project with the parking lot expense of paving of that, like, and have them be so.
Well, so that's sealing the asphalt. This is adding additional paving.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is gonna be concrete. That's in addition to the asphalt.
Yeah, we don't seal the concrete.
Don't have to post concrete.
Well, no, I was just thinking, well, part of the parking lot,
Right.
so that's what I was, that's
And
what
we would probably do this, the concrete leading out to the street would probably be about 8 inches thick, because it has to accommodate the buses then.
Nick, what's our timetable on this?
We have until August 13th, technically with the fire marshal, to get the new tank installed. But if we have a contractor hired, then we can get an additional 30 days. The tank is already on order. We already have concrete contractors working on estimates. They don't seem uncomfortable with the timeline, given the amount of excavation they probably have to do.
How ugly is this gonna look above ground?
What's that?
How ugly is this gonna look?
You know those white propane tanks that farmers have on their property?
Yeah.
It'll actually look better than that, because it'll have nice concrete surrounding it. It'll be a brand new white tank.
We can paint a bulldog on it.
We can put a big bulldog logo on it.
And we could have, did you say, I'm sorry, that one quickly, an additional 30 days if we had the contractor on, okay.
Yep.
So could we go beyond August 13th?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
So not all bad news, but.
It is what it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, so the 5-year inspection, we were expecting an issue with water. We've been monitoring the water level, but it wasn't until we were actually draining the tanks into 55-gallon drums that we saw how bad it was, and knew then. I actually got an estimate for an above-ground tank back in March, in anticipation of this test. So
Well, good job on that.
we're hopefully somewhat prepared. Any other questions?
Questions for Nick?
Nick, you sound like an experienced guy and someone who rode a bus as a kid.
I did not ride a bus as a kid. Luckily, I had an older sister that got her license, but I did used to work in the concrete industry, so you got a little bit of background there.
That's true, I forgot about that.
Right there,
We're getting,
Springfield Avenue, right?
we're getting great concrete in this project, I'm sure. Okay. Any other questions for Nick?
I just want to thank Nick and Steve for their reports, and
Yep.
they've just been amazing additions to our team here, and really appreciate your work. Thank you.
All right. And by the time we meet again, you'll have this all figured out.
We'll be done.
You're on the clock till August 13th. Okay. Item Item number 6 is a proposed board policy. Mr. Keefe was supposed to be here tonight to present that. As far as we knew, Mr. Keefe was supposed to be here tonight. So something has come up. I've got mixed feelings. I'll defer to what the board wants to do. You know, it's on the agenda. Everybody knew it was gonna be here, so we could go forward and do it. On the other hand, he was gonna present it, and it might lose something in the presentation without him being here. So we can table it till next month, or we can present it tonight. What do y'all think?
I say we table it, in fairness to Ken.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
Fine with that.
Okay. Since it's on the agenda, we probably should have some kind of motion, how to
Yes,
dispose
I
of it.
move to table it.
So we got a motion.
I second.
Second, okay. Motion table, second, further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's tabled till or the agenda item is tabled till next month. Board committee approval, Dr. Hall.
Getting everything out, what's that?
I know I shot right through that last one, so you're ready to go.
This is just approval of our board committees. Policy 2150 requires Board of Education approval for committee assignments, so those committees are listed. Our policy committee is Megan Hennessy and Lori Larson. Finance is Merle Giles and Ken Keefe, and facilities is Dr. Hendricks and Ken Keefe.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the board committees as presented. Is there a motion to do that? Yes. Yeah, there's a yes from Ken. Lori, is that a second?
Yes from Merle.
I'm sorry,
Second from
Merle.
Lori.
Ken's the guy who's not here. That was Merle, I'm sorry. Lori, was that a second?
Yes.
Discussion.
Colleen, you didn't want to be on that committee?
I actually offered to be on the curriculum committee. I
remember
thought we
that.
should have. So when she asked, that was the curriculum committee, but Max decided, because I know he's the president who determines committees, not to have that committee, so.
You don't want to be on any of these?
So then
Colleen's gonna be involved, we've got existing apparatuses and for
No, I
for that.
understand, I'm
We're
just saying,
involved in
I did volunteer to be on the
I
committee.
remember that.
I just didn't say no, but.
It's an existing committee doesn't need to be approved, so.
I did try, so that's okay.
She's gonna do that, and we're gonna let her. It just doesn't need to be approved on this. Okay. Any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Keith, Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy, Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Trent, driver's education.
So the school code actually caps the behind-the-wheel driver's education fees at $250. Now, Illinois school districts do have the option, or the ability rather, to apply for a waiver to increase that beyond $250. And apparently for the last several years, Mahomet-Seymour has had that waiver. I'm not sure when that started, but it was a while ago. In either case, that has expired for school year 1920. And after we look at the driver's ed program isolated and seeing how we're doing with that, we aren't in the hole with that. So we're going to choose to go ahead and let the waiver expire and let the fees drop down to $250. That's the recommendation.
And that will start with the 1920 school year.
School year, correct, yep.
Wow. We have never decreased driver's
Wow.
ed fees, ever. Oh, sorry, it wasn't discussion time. The superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the driver's education fees as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Larson, is there a second? Second. Jeremy. All right, now I'll make the comment. Wow, we have never decreased driver's ed fees.
Maybe the shocker of insurance and that.
Yeah,
Okay.
do
It's a
it,
shot.
do it.
So just, FYI, in the last couple of years, we have replaced 2 driver's ed vehicles, and, we look at that program in isolation and how it operates, and we still have 1 vehicle that probably needs replaced over the next few years or so, but we're in a good spot in terms of funding and the budget for that program.
Okay, further questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Giles.
Yes.
Keith, Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy, McComb.
Yes. Agenda item 9 is community engagement discussion. This is another topic. There was a little bit of talk between Dr. Hall and I and some of the board members were engaged in conversations with Dr. Hall on that. This is, of course, something we're trying to get off the ground this fall. We originally were hoping to do it last spring. And Mrs. Hennessy asked to be a part of some of that discussion, and she was unable to be here tonight. So what we're going to do, out of respect for that, is because the fall calendar is starting to book, there's a time commitment piece to that. So we're gonna go ahead and have limited discussion on this tonight, just to put in place some pieces that are time sensitive and we need to have in place. And then we'll continue discussion next month with some of the details on how this is gonna work when Mrs. Hennessy can be here. So, Dr. Hall?
Thank you. I just want to provide a bit of background and a very brief overview of where we have been with this and bring us up to date. And then I think what I'd like to do just as a goal tonight is to try to land on some dates this fall, and then that'll give us plenty of time to engage in more discussion with our absent board members, who I know have some really valuable ideas to contribute to the process. So just a little bit of history here. We started this discussion back in February. Had a special meeting in March to discuss this further. At the end of March, Merle and Lori and I met with our IASB field rep and talked a little bit about just the process and what it could look like. We met with that person from the standpoint that the board felt it important that there be just a neutral facilitator and kind of host for the community engagement sessions, and that person would also serve as someone who summarizes the feedback that we get and brings it back to the board. Unfortunately, that person is no longer with the IASB, but I connected with our new person today, our new field rep, and I'll address that in just a few minutes. Then we also continued the discussion at the April 1st study session. So I'm not gonna, this has been presented multiple times. I'm not gonna go back through and go through these things word by word, but the overarching why behind doing this is building relationships, listening to our community, gaining multiple perspectives, engaging in two-way communication, and really the end game is to have this community engagement initiative inform a strategic plan or vision that will guide the board over the next 5 years or so. We talked also a little bit about what this is. It's an opportunity for everybody to listen and learn, but mostly the board. It's a way to get information to inform a plan. It facilitates interaction between the board and community. And again, a real focus here is that a diverse group of voices are heard. We have all kinds of people in our community, and when I say all kinds, I mean they're connected to the schools in different ways, and in some cases not even connected to the schools, but they all support us in one way or another, but mostly through the fact that they pay taxes and we get financial support from the people in our school district, and listening and hearing their voices are very important. So what we talked about, and again, these are things that are they're open for discussion, but I think we kind of narrowed down and funneled things to a little bit of a process, conducting at least 2 community engagement meetings and a staff meeting, which is to obtain feedback around teaching and learning, facilities and finance, and the culture and ongoing engagement with our community by the board. Obtaining feedback through asking a small but effective number of questions. Those questions can still be determined and worked on. Participants would be working in small groups with the recorder, and then having the Illinois Association of School Boards facilitate this process. They do this in multiple places, districts around the state. Basically, for lack of a better term, master of ceremonies or facilitator who introduces and explains the process, and then collects and summarizes the data, groups the responses into major themes or ideas, and then that gets shared back to the board. It's also one thing that we talked about was in those meetings, providing an overview of the topic so that our participants and our folks that come to these meetings have some baseline information from which to work, and that school district staff would be available to answer specific questions about facilities or finance and just basically how things are done. But we want our community members who come and participate to have some information upon, you know, which to have discussions and have questions answered while they're there so that they can give us valuable feedback. We also talked about doing these meetings at locations other than the school district, churches. Corn Belt keeps coming up because they have a really nice meeting room that's very large, but there are multiple places around the community that we could do that, and just kind of show our commitment to reaching out. These meetings are completely open to the public, but we do want to limit them to residents of the school district. And one idea that we talked about was doing a survey ahead of time. Back in the springtime, we had talked about maybe linking that to online registration. We're not going to be able to do that, but that does not eliminate the possibility of doing a survey. And this would be just to provide information to the Board of Education ahead of the project, just to kind of give us an idea of what people are thinking, that could help us inform the process and provide perspective to the board as we move ahead with that process. We talked about branding this process as MS Engages. And another topic that came up that I was hearing that the board was committed to was that this not be a one and done, that the community engagement piece and the two-way communication really just become part of what we do and our culture moving ahead. Short term, we talked about doing this in August and September, probably not going to be that early at this point, that's absolutely fine. And then long-term, doing a state of the district in the future, in the springtime, starting in the spring of 2020, and that's just to, again, embed the practice of communicating and engaging with our community. So there's a lot of, the process is still, there's a lot to be determined, which is fine. We've got some time for that. I think, again, what I'm after tonight is just probably setting some dates in October. Also just talked about forming a district learning team or something along with or a similar name. And the purpose of that team would be, it'd be made up of staff, parents, and community members, but it would continue the engagement process, sustain it across time, so that we just continue the discussion and keep the lines of communication open. And we did have a staff meeting with our whole staff on May 15th, and an overview of this process was also given to our staff on that day. So that brings us up to this evening, and I have had the opportunity to connect with our new field service rep and talked with him today, actually. His name is Perry Hill, and ran these ideas past him, and I think he's excited to work with us and see some really great possibilities. We do need to kind of work with him on his availability. He is a field rep for a very large geographic section of the middle of Illinois, so he is working with lots and lots of school districts. But I do have some dates when he's available, and probably would be a good idea to lock in on these dates. Selecting these dates doesn't obligate us to anything else that I've talked about. Again, I think it's important that Mrs. Hennessy and Mr. Keefe are here to talk about the process together as the whole board and get their ideas and input just on what the meetings would look like and anything that we do in advance. And so we do have some time to do that. But was looking at October 17th, October 23rd, and October 30th.
How many dates do we need to reserve?
I would go with 3, and then if somehow we decide we don't want 3, then we
So
can.
we're recommending blocking all 3 days.
Yeah, I would. That's how, just get on their calendar and then.
Will it matter, the 23rd isn't early out, do you think that would matter with the participation that we might get, and then the parent conferences are the next day, and then there's no school?
I mean, yes, it could, I
I mean,
think.
if we pick a date, I will be there, but I was just thinking about if we want to engage the community, they might not be,
Yeah,
that'd be a great time to be gone, and there's no school Friday, so.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that could be, I don't wanna say a problem, it
Sure.
could definitely be a conflict on people's calendars. The only thing, again, that we're kind of tied to, the availability of a facilitator
Sure,
as well. So we can look further into the fall. I hesitate to do that. I feel like once November's here, people kind of go into like, oh, it's holidays.
Yes.
And I know that the folks at the Illinois Association of School Boards also get very busy with their preparation for the annual conference in Chicago,
Oh,
which
sure
is
they
right
do.
around
Yes.
Thanksgiving.
I would say
So-
we should probably go ahead and block those dates for now. That might make a difference what we put on what night maybe.
Can always not use the dates.
What was the first date you gave, I apologize? October
17th, it's a Thursday.
And I'll do whichever. I mean, twice. 17, 23.
And we don't have time to anticipate it'll be.
In the evening, yeah.
I have a
Evening.
question. So, go ahead.
I don't know exactly when you wanna have which conversations, so I'm just gonna say this. You can stop me if I shouldn't.
No, please do.
I am so excited at this idea of community engagement. I mean, anyone who paid attention during the campaign knows that's what I was talking about all the time, right? Really, I'm for transparency and communication. I'm a little concerned that this feels to me like it's starting in the middle instead of starting at the beginning. And so I'm hoping that we as a board could back it up a little bit and talk about some of the things like who exactly it is that we're trying to reach, the stakeholders, who's doing the reaching, that we might identify how those people want to be contacted. Because I feel like, you know, all of us have been interviewed by the media before. If someone sets a tape recorder down in front of you, you don't say what you might ordinarily say. There might be other ways people prefer to interact. I noticed nowhere in any of the conversation do we ever talk about students, right? Getting feedback from students. So I feel like identifying some, you know, who is the community that we're trying to reach, why we're trying to reach them, how we want to reach them. Do we ask them how they want to be contacted? Do we ask them, you know, I just feel like this idea that we're going to have these meetings might end up being something we do, but I feel like it's a little down the road from backing up to some of these earlier discussions. And so I feel a little bit nervous about scheduling dates, that somehow we'll feel some kind of pressure to do something that we might not if we ordinarily did. So
That's fair.
there's so much I feel like I want to do it right, and I want to have, you know, in your why, I can't remember which slide it was. It was, you know, you talked about you wanted to get the diversity of opinion, and you wanted to build trusting relationships and have two-way communication. And when I hear sit at a table with a tape recorder, I don't.
I didn't.
Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't.
It's not literally a tape recorder. There would be a person who is designated
To record. Or
Like we had that at the meeting,
Yeah.
we put paper up on the wall, it was open, and we wrote our things down about that's how we got all of this. In February, March.
Embracing this. I'm just saying.
Well, we've purposely left this really open-ended. I mean, those are
Right, I mean,
very valuable questions, and I think.
I feel like I'd love to have this discussion.
I think that was a
I'm
discussion
grateful
earlier.
that you want to wait for Megan and Ken, because I think we should all be here as, you know, but I'm a little nervous because I feel like we need to do this sort of back work before and build relationships and express to people, you know, there's feelings people have, and maybe identify how people are feeling about communicating. I mean, I just feel like there's so much we can do to make the actions we take be so much more successful. And so I would like at least for us to discuss that.
I think once we have that discussion, if we decide we need to delay this, we can. But we've already delayed it for the spring.
That's what I just hate is
And if we don't,
we're moving
if we
again.
don't get some dates on the calendar, we won't have a shot at doing it this fall. Now, we may decide doing it this fall is not the right thing. And I respect that if we come to that decision. Some of the things you were talking about, I think we'd hope to talk about tonight, but we were asked if we, respectfully, if we could wait, and so we opted to do that.
I asked too, so I appreciate that.
So,
I think you raised some excellent points, thank you.
It could be that the October dates are a beginning where we may not prep ourselves quite as well as we might be able to if we had more time. But the delay to spring might, that payoff, that get a beginning in October to the beginning of the spring might be well worth it.
It might be.
It's like merits the conversation certainly.
In some things that I've done for research projects with jobs at university and even in schools, a lot of times we set a starting block as kind of a needs assessment, and that could kind of be what that is. We have our needs assessment in these meetings where we're engaging the community and we find out, wow, this is where we are. Before we run the race, we gotta start here and figure it out. So my worry is I think we do some good planning ahead, but if we keep waiting, then we're just talking, it's all talking, it's not gonna happen. That's what I would worry about. Because I've been on 2 years, and this was February, and now we're talking about October, and that's 8 months from when we first started talking about it. So, and we said it would be a continuum. So, and I hope it'll be a continuum.
I'm an action person too, so I love that idea of action. What I fear is that unless we do that back work, the people that we get to show up are not a diverse set of opinions, and then we might find ourselves believing that this opinion represents the entire community,
right?
When there's a lot of valid reasons that people aren't at that table.
How can the
So that's all I'm saying. I'm done.
So the 5 Essential Survey is back. Like, how can that come into play with us looking at moving forward, right?
Well, the 5 Essential Survey looks very specifically at what are the factors that contribute to an effective learning environment. So it
Just
asks,
one focal area.
yeah,
Okay.
it asks just.
It's been a long time.
It asks a very
Filled it up.
specific question, and I mean it can certainly inform actions that we move ahead with. And I know our principals have been looking at the results from their buildings. It's also important to remember that those, with the exception of one of our buildings, those surveys were taken under the leadership of different people. So it serves a little bit different of a purpose than this. Still valuable data for sure, and it appears on our school report card now. And we can certainly discuss about if there's ways to incorporate the results of the 5 Essential Survey into this process. Thank you.
I would suggest that maybe we have one of these dates and we move it into November for our farming community. If they happen to be harvesting and busy at that time, we might miss a large subset of our population.
Maybe we can lose that
Ross, it's gonna be really late.
that date
Yeah.
that's got the.
I'll have to check on November dates.
And go into the first part of November.
Okay.
I'm not available on October 17th, I know that.
I don't see anything wrong with putting dates on the calendar, just because I think it's better, if we're gonna operate with a deadline, we're gonna at least, I am also an action-oriented person. I would say we can get this done and reach those stakeholders in that period of time. I don't know, I don't see a problem with putting dates on a calendar.
With our full intention that, we're talking about this being engaging. We've started since February, we're gonna go forward, and we're gonna go.
All right.
I was also wondering, with the IASB, how the transparency with using an outside organization is. I know that when we do things in the district, there are certain things we're transparent about, but when we outsource things to an outside agency, I don't know if we lose our ability to know what happens or people's FOIA requests and things like that. How is that gonna work with an outside agency? If we wanna be transparent and then we're doing,
I think the thought of the board when the discussion occurred was that having a neutral outside person facilitate this could be more effective than using someone else who's maybe internal or an employee.
And how much will we pay for their services?
I don't know for sure. It's gonna be in the hundreds.
Hundreds, not thousands. We've used them before, they're always free.
That's certainly up for discussion. The original thought was that was more neutral and unbiased than using internal.
It also allows us to participate in some ways that we might not otherwise if we had been in the leadership role for that. And we had some pretty good experience with this, a couple of things, with 5-year strategies, maybe a couple times. I think we did some community engagement when we went looking for superintendent back pre-Rick. Maybe Keith, I don't know, way back then too. And I think the participation, we were in Middletown Prairie, I think, that filled the room.
Last 5-year plan, which should be their 7-year plan, they were involved. All right, well, that gives us some thoughts and some places to go tonight. That'll be on the agenda again next month for some more detailed discussion. At this time, a closed session is necessary for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee of the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, determines validity, or 2, collecting negotiating matters between the public body and its employees and their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedule for one or more classes of employees. Is there a motion to go into closed session for those reasons?
So moved.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeremy. Roll call vote, please.
Larson,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hennessy, Keith, Schultz,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, so we'll break and clear the room and go into closed session in about 10 minutes.